Good evening and welcome to a new edition of To The Point. This evening with a distinguished lady, we're going to be discussing the latest economic reform package and where is Egypt heading in light of a lot of economic reforms and political changes worldwide, including the U.S. elections. Quite a surprise ending to the U.S. elections. How will this affect us? Will be under discussion this evening on To The Point with a distinguished lady. With us this evening is Her Excellency Dr Pacinte Fahmy, member of the Egyptian Parliament. A pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure.
We have a lot of changes. Let me start by maybe one of the first events that took place and then move forward. An event which you called on right at this table. For years you were calling for the floating of the Egyptian pound. You were very much against the policies that were carried out by the previous regime, and I'm not talking about the Brotherhood, I'm talking about the Mubarak regime,
yes,
to be specific. Even at the time, you came out on air and saying we're committing a catastrophe by trying to go against a proper economic trend or what have you, and protecting the Egyptian pound this way is wrong, and you were calling for the flotation. Mm-hmm. Well, we floated.
Very late.
And we really floated. And the dollar now is 16 plus at an official rate, which is close to the black market, but of course, as far as a lot of people are concerned, it's a nightmare.
It is not really a nightmare. We were in a nightmare. Because, as you mentioned, this decision should have been made years ago.
Yes.
It is made, it's very late, but better late than never. And now we want to promote investment. We talked a lot about investment, but there are minor things or small things, in our opinion, which is affecting that environment. You can never go to a market where there are different prices for the dollar. You can never work in a market where the dollar is considered a commodity. People are dealing in it as if it's a commodity. They buy and sell to make money. You can never go to a market, and when you need foreign currency, you have to search in the streets. You have to go to the official centers like the central bank, the banking system.
Yes.
So this decision should have been made a long time ago. Finally, it is made. Very late, but made.
Why do you?
Because
if we had taken this decision 5-6 years ago, how would it be different?
I recommended in 2011 when we had the revolution. I said this is the best time to devalue.
You don't think it would have increased the fuel at the street level?
What fuel? We were in a revolution. You have all the reasons. Fine, we didn't do it. Okay, take it bit by bit, meaning if it would have been done slowly during the last 4 or 5 years, 10 piastres by 5 piastres, you would have reached high levels instead of having those shocks. I hate the management by shocks. It is unacceptable, and sometimes, especially when it has to do with large population.
If we had floated in 2011, as you had said, would we have seen a lesser inflation, for example?
Definitely, because we had a very high level, a good level of reserves.
Okay.
We had 35, and we had 9 from the Gulf War. That makes 45. When you have that level of reserves, you're more or less protected. You can control the market. You see?
Legally, could we have done this at the time? Because
Definitely.
In 2011, you didn't really have a president. You had someone that was an acting president, so to speak. Did he have the right to do something like this?
Central bank does this. It's not the president.
So at the time, there was no problem with doing it, even though...
No problem. On the contrary, you would have had all the justification in the world. In the revolution. We don't know where we're going. You see what I mean? It's an unstable situation. And you had good amount of reserve. You spent all your reserves during the same period trying to protect the value of your pound. How can you protect the value of a currency in a war, in a revolution, in an unstable war? When I say war, I mean it. Because we are in a war against terrorism. 2 revolutions. In 2 revolutions. So you should have had that protection instead of throwing it away like this by people definitely in a state of revolution. They will transfer their money abroad, definitely. You see what I mean? Definitely people will tend to buy dollars and transfer it abroad. So it should have been expected. But anyway, that's history. We're not going to talk about it.
One day we wake up to read the headlines that the Egyptian pound is now swimming freely. And the next day we hear that subsidy on fuel has been reduced.
Again, in my opinion, it's a wrong approach. It should have been done. The same results would have been reached, but should have been done not all together. Meaning, I always say it's as if you have somebody who's sick, the doctor came, he wrote for you in a prescription 5 or 6 medicines, so you took them all in one shot. You can't. You can't. You will not be able to support all this. So now you stand in a situation where you have to protect the modest class and the middle class, or else you would be faced with social instability.
You're always talking about protecting, because this is the first time I hear someone talking about the middle class, because whenever we talk about protection, it's usually the lower classes, yet this move really affects the middle more than the lower, because the government is supporting the lower class.
Seriously, the middle, if you don't have a strong middle class, your economy will not move.
How can you protect the middle class in circumstances like this?
Many ways. Either you increase a little bit their salaries.
Where from?
Either, I'm giving you...
I'm playing here the devil's advocate, because this is what's being said.
No, but middle class, who are the middle class? Doctors, lawyers, bankers, engineers, all those, most of them work in a private sector.
And you have quite a large chunk working in the public sector.
Yes, the public sector is manageable because they don't produce as much. But the private sector can manage. And I always say the middle class in Egypt is divided into two. One I can really sympathize with, which are the public sector employees, and the other one I don't. Why? Because they don't pay proper taxes. And we have to admit that. They don't pay proper taxes. So now even if they will be affected, they have the possibility to pass through this period. Little difficult, but the other half of the middle class, which are the public sector employees, that's difficult. Because their revenues they have a ceiling. You see, it's not like the people who works in the other... The modest class cannot do anything, because we've started to solve the problems by combating the slums project, people living in those areas. Now you are trying to solve the problems. You have to give them some social help, like I am totally disagreeing on the concept of a card with 21 points. No, we don't want this point issue. We want merchandise issue or items issue, meaning you say everybody is entitled to 1 kilo of rice, sugar.
What about financial subsidy? In most countries,
eventually
you get
it will come to
money,
this,
and it's up to you how you want to spend it. This is how the country is helping you.
Yes, eventually it will happen. So we are moving towards this, but this in the middle period or in this period, you have to do it this way. And you can give them some other help. For instance, when you give them cards to go to the public transport for free, especially for students and for elderly people, the ladies who are taking care of their families, you can help them. And I think that 1% of the GDP has to be dedicated to protect that class during this period. Because in any country, when you go through a process of trying to adjust your financial situation, definitely inflation will go high, definitely unemployment is still there, definitely they will suffer. So you have to protect them, because if you don't protect them, you run a risk that you might not be able to continue your program. You see, we have a very, how do you call it, challenging program.
Yes.
We have a large level of deficit, we have inflation, we have unemployment, we have a modest level of reserves, we have a lot of problems on the economic side, on a macroeconomic indicators. So if you want to have, and we have a good program, if you want this program to succeed, you have to protect those classes. Because if any movement or any instability will be seen on that class, you will not be able to continue.
Do you think that something like the reform program, the way we are moving, and indeed it's at a fast pace, you know, things were very relaxed, and then all of a sudden it's hitting us hard, and unfortunately it is tied to, by the people really, it is tied to the IMF loan. Is this dictated to us by the IMF?
No. Whether you have the IMF or not, you have to do that.
It's inevitable.
Inevitable. Inevitable, I mean it. Or else we would go into...
Are we on the right track? Because in the past you were not very happy.
No, we are on the right track, but I am a little bit worried about the competency of the group. Meaning, I see up till now, I received 3 versions of the new investment law.
Okay.
Receive the version, go through it, and then say, this is not the last one, we got another one. Then, this is not the last one, we got another one. What's the problem?
In which time, in what time frame?
In less than a month. What
3 copies of
3
the...
copies. What is this?
Are the changes very different?
Yes. They're serious. Not only very different, they're very serious. And every time, we don't even complete the analysis and the study of the law. They go, no, we're getting another one. No, we stayed with those groups and they have some comments. Why don't you do it once and for all? We've been talking about that law ever since Sharm el-Sheikh. You remember?
March of...
Impossible.
Last year.
I am not pro, you will be surprised, I'm not pro an investment law.
No, you said it's not necessary. This is not what's...
We need an environment. And then,
but isn't this law supposedly putting the basis of the environment?
No. And each time it comes out different. For instance, let's take the concept of taxes. You want to give tax exemption. Want to give tax exemption to Egyptians, I could understand this. But you want to give tax exemption to international companies, they will pay it in their country because there is something called global tax system.
So why are we exempting international companies?
Probably because we don't know. We don't know. I mean, if you exempt a foreigner here, he will pay it in his country. That's what you call the global tax system. So why are you...
By international regulations, he is supposed to pay taxes so long as...
Either here or there. So if you exempt,
he will pay there.
You're giving it a gift to the other country, which doesn't make any sense. You want to exempt Egyptian, I can understand. You want to exempt young generation, I can understand. You want to subsidize agriculture, I can understand. Everybody subsidizes agriculture, including the United States, in a way or the other.
But you subsidize it for locals, not for international investors.
You see what I mean? So this is what I don't understand. There are many things. The way land is allocated. The word allocation means what? Takhsis. So you're selling, you're renting, you're leasing. What are you doing? Why you have open-ended clause? They are not definite. You see what I mean? You read the clause, it always needs further explanation. Another clause, you read it, it needs further explanation.
Shouldn't the parliament be drafting this law?
No, the government drafted it. We could have drafted a law. The government drafted it and changed it several times.
Why isn't the parliament drafting? Because this is the legislative entity. The government is the executive.
It's true.
The parliament is the legislative.
But sometimes they could draft laws.
I'm just saying that I would assume that the parliament is supposed to be the entity that drafts.
In all honesty, we drafted some laws. But again, the government says we have a good law. So we receive it officially. Go through the law, by the time you finish and make your comments, you have another version. And so you need to see what the investor wants. I always tell them, because I worked in the investment field all my life. When you present something to an investor, you have to read it with his eyes, not our eyes. You see what I mean? What does an investor want? And maybe I can offer, and sometimes I say I cannot. But I cannot draft something based on my opinion, you see? And you don't copy as well laws which have been successful somewhere else 20 or 30 years ago. No.
As we talk, probably some foreign investor is watching us. Why would he want to invest? Because this is a question that I always ask. Why should he or she come and put their money in Egypt?
Because there are, like President Trump mentioned, he's a businessman. He said, I've been watching the globe. I know where are the wealth. Where can I invest? Sometimes...
Where's the potential?
Here's the potential. For instance, Egypt has a lot of wealth, like gold, like gas, like oil, you see, like agriculture. It's true that the United States is a very big agriculture country, but we can as well, people can come and invest here and sell in Africa, you see. So there are opportunities. When you look at the globe, it became too small. So if you, in the United States, you did it all, and you almost reached the ceiling, an investor should go overseas. Like all the cross-border companies or the multinationals, they call it now, they call it cross-border. Why did they go to Europe? Why did they go to the Middle East? Why? Because the market there became too small for them and they became too big for the market. So eventually they have to move. Where do they move? Where there is an opportunity to invest, but with a good environment. You see? I cannot go, for instance, in an area where war is 24 hours there, where instability could be seen, social instability, for instance, and many things. So why the multinationals went across? Because their market became too small for them. So they have to move somewhere else. They cannot be closed in that area. So that's why they go somewhere. Why American companies went to China? And they build that big...
Well, there's a lot of question marks about whether they will continue in China or not.
They will not continue, I know, but when Europe as well has a big problem now.
We have with us online Dr. Pacinte Fahmy, who's a leading financial expert and also was a member of the IMF. Dr. Fahmy, can you hear us?
Yes.
Dr. Fahmy, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Yes. Sir, can you tell us the IMF loan, how far have we gone? I mean, can we say that we have secured the allocated amount? I know you don't like the word allocated. What are the steps now?
Well, after we received the first tranche of the loan, which is almost $2.75 billion, deposited with the central bank, increasing the central bank reserve reached to $23.5 billion, which is, reflects itself in more confidence on the market, and this would support, the value of the Egyptian pound vis-a-vis the dollar. To the extent we have a trend, a downward trend of the dollar in the interbank market, goes down from 18 Egyptian pounds per dollar down to today, say almost $15. So it dropped by $4 in the last 10 days. This gives us, prove that liberalizing the exchange rate market was a good step. What we need for the next 3 months is to give more confidence to the market and to reverse the expectations of the people and the institutions dealing in the interbank market that the trend is a downward trend. Therefore, people they start to sell the purchase value and their deposits and convert it into different pounds, and to take advantage of the increase of interest rates on certificates of deposit from the banks like National Bank of Egypt, Mr. Bank, and Cairo. So they try to take advantage of the interest rate increase for those certificates of deposit up to 20% per year. And also we have other certificate deposits with 16% growth. Increase in interest rate when we encourage the system to convert, the dollar to $4 and converted to different pounds to take advantage of the high street. This, will lay the foundation to more, decreasing the exchange rate of the dollar in the interbank market. In addition to this, we have, witnessed that, some investment funds and hot money, they are forthcoming to Egypt in order to make arbitrage between interest rate arbitrage. So the cost of the interest rate, borrowed interest rate abroad, almost 4 to 5%. So they will see, they will convert the dollar at the central bank, in foreign reserve of the central bank, and so they will take the equivalent in different pounds to invest it in treasury bills to see the interest rate of 18 to 20% on treasury bills. Those kind of investments could, play a, significant, increasing the reserve of the bank furthermore, and to the extent this would, reduce, the exchange rate of the dollar in the market. So right now we will go, smoothly, and what we need, for the coming few months is to take the necessary measures to encourage businessmen and foreign investments to be forthcoming to Egypt. So what we need is to make, to pursue the new investment law within the coming, by the end of this year, to improve the climate and new investment environment and climate in Egypt and make it easy to make business. This is very important, and this is a cornerstone for the coming, 6 months, because after 6 months, in particular, in May, the Mexican government mission will come to Egypt to make the biannual review of the economic.
When is after the biannual, which is, as you said, in 6 months, do we get the second part of the loan?
Most probably will be in April, beginning of May of 2017, after 6 months from the first payment received by the central bank. So they will come and try to evaluate and make a review of the
progress.
Yes, the performance of the program. If the program is on track, so they will release the second tranche, which is up to $1.25 billion. This, again, will increase the reserve of the central bank. If the program is off track, so the Egyptian government has to justify why the program is off track, deviated from the mainstream. So if the Egyptian government, they give, the IMF mission, a reasonable justification, so they will proceed and give us the second. Maybe they will postpone little bit the second tranche. If, the Egyptian government didn't give, a satisfactory or convincing or justified, proof why the program is off track, then the ask for additional, measures, additional requirements. So to, restore the program back to its, to be on track again.
Yes.
So maybe this will be something, if it's, so the problem now, the government has to, be serious, because the coming few months is very, essential and very critical to be on track most of the time and to abide by the measures agreed upon between the Egyptian authorities and the IMF.
Dr. Pacinte Fahmy, thank you very much for your fruitful input. In his statement, and I'm sorry about that, the sound was not very good, but if I understood correctly, Dr. Fahmy was stressing on the investment law and that this is one of the things that have to be completed before the biannual review, which is in 6 months, in addition to the fact that there is like a protocol of agreement between the Egyptian government and the IMF that they will follow up and make sure that we are on par. You just shed light on the investment law, and we really have to get it out. But when we talk about an agreement between the IMF and the Egyptian government, what kind of an agreement we're talking about? And does this not conform within our economic reform program, or what?
No, it is an agreement whereby it's like any loan. This is not some advanced without, this is a loan. So it's not a grant.
Yes.
Like any loan, you have the content of the loan itself, the amount, and then some governance. And here is important. Governance meaning that you have to do this and that. For instance, we will have every 6 months a review. You will have to decrease the deficit of the budget by so, and so on. Some governance. Some of them have been declared yesterday, like 1% of the GDP to be spent to ensure social stability.
Doesn't this go, I mean, we have a constitution, and maybe for the first time we saw in a constitution facts and figures, so to speak, that we have this percentage allocated to education, this percentage allocated to health reform. I mean, this time our constitution is quite different.
Yeah, but we did not have that 1% of GDP to social stability. Yeah, we talked about education, we talked about health, and we talked about many things, but we couldn't comply because of budget deficit, and we didn't have enough resources. But here is a must, because with any instability and any disturbance, you will not be able to pay the loan. And here, as a lender, I have some covenants. You see what I mean? If you don't pay, if you default, this will happen, that will happen. Those covenants has to be clearly read, and that's why I said the group and the government has to be very competent to follow up very closely on the macroeconomic indicators and how they are moving, to follow up very closely on the social level, because social stability is a word to be said, but sometimes God forbid, but you can't control. You see what I mean? When things goes out of hand, when prices will fly sky high, and will not be able really to live. Yeah, Egyptians can support everybody's understanding what is happening. We are in a critical period, we're in a war, whatever. But sometimes you could reach a situation where they cannot take it anymore. You see what I mean? And that's why they stressed that point. And I spoke about it several times before even the agreement is signed. As a banker even, when we finance, we have to make sure that this company is stable.
And that this company can pay back.
Exactly. And if I feel that the labor would create any type of problem, I cannot lend, because they will stop. So I will not be paid. So there are things we need to take care very carefully. What is worrying me a little bit is some indicators which are not really positive, like that we did not yet get the investment law. What is happening?
Whenever
you want to stick to the old law, stick to the old law with some amendment. You want to group some clauses from different laws, go ahead, but finish with it. And we do not want to see open-ended clause.
There is a concern about the loans. By some intellectuals are saying, well, this increases our deficit, so to speak. And these loans, as you were saying, these are loans, not grants. Who's going to pay them?
We have asked several times at the Parliament, and we insist on getting the schedule of repayment for the future. We call it the debt runoff schedule. We want to see the installment, total installment year by year, interest year by year, and how can we pay back? From where? It is called in the finance debt runoff schedule. We asked the central bank several times, we asked the Ministry of Finance several times, I hope we can get it, because when you have this in front of you, you can say, well, it is controllable or no. For instance, I am not against borrowing, but you borrow to invest. You don't borrow to eat and dress. You borrow to invest, so the investment will generate money to pay the loan,
pay the debt,
installment and interest. And that's why we asked for the runoff schedule. We want to see, borrow as much as you want. Okay, there are countries who borrowed more than us, like the United States. But where do you send this money? How can you use it? If you are using it in investment, which generate money to pay the installments and the interest rates, well and fine, you see? But if you are taking this to throw it in the budget and eat, get dressed.
Well, isn't this something that the government and the parliament work together hand in hand with? Because
they should give us this. Because the government, when they borrow, the borrowing should be directed towards a specific thing.
Is this not already in the plan?
This is the plan.
That we asked for the loan because we were going to do A, B, and C?
It should be. It is in the plan, definitely. But if you throw it in the budget just to cover some deficits, it's incorrect. When the money comes, we need to see how they're going to be used. It's not a matter of writing. You can write an excellent plan. But when you come to implementation, you don't implement properly for a reason or the other. You see what I mean? So here, you take an amount from the fund, you put it in the reserve. Then you use it from the reserve. The reserve is to pay installments, interest, to finance companies to import their raw material, to finance companies to import necessary goods, medical equipment or medicines. There are things where you can use your reserves in it. But if you use the reserves in other things, if you use it always to bring food and you don't go on parallel with your agriculture plan, it will finish.
As I said in my introduction, we have to capitalize on a momentum. A new president is in the White House. His agenda seems quite different. He drew a positive picture about potential investment in Egypt.
In the world. But when you look at the world, it's too small and it's left by our area. You see what I mean? When I always say, look at the map. You have Europe, then you have the Far East, you have Middle East and Africa, and the United States and the NAFTA. Really, this area is an attractive area, but it has a lot of... You have to settle the war first.
Well, according to his statements, and let us hope that once he sits in the White House, his statements will not differ. He pointed out to the catastrophic scenario in Syria, in Libya, in Iraq, and he even blamed the previous administration for causing this disabling.
It's against any thinking of economic development. If you want to have an economic development, you want to use wealth of countries jointly, no matter what will be.
We're talking to a businessman here.
Exactly. You need stability. You need an environment.
How can we capitalize on the fact that we have a real successful businessman sitting right there in the White House? Or will be sitting
I
right
listened
there?
very carefully to his speech, which was totally different than during his campaign. He spoke about first the United States and said, we're going to double our GDP. We're going to start by building infrastructure, roads, railways, whatever, which is very wise. Then he spoke
He's thinking about local interests.
Definitely.
I mean, this is well within his right.
No, but again, he said, I have been looking to the world. I know where are the wealth, and I know how can I cooperate. And this, to me, was very important if it's really going to continue to be true. I will cooperate with other countries to develop the wealth for both interests. He's a businessman.
Which is a businessman talk.
Which is okay.
I mean, he even said in his campaign trail, I don't think we should be funding countries' security, for example.
Definitely, and if you want security, you pay.
This is what he said. Yes, I mean, this is a businessman talk.
This is correct. But let me tell you something, what in my personal opinion, I was a little bit...
concerned.
Concerned, is that when he talked about investment, immediately investment needs an environment. So I assumed, he said, I'm going to fight terrorism. This has to stop, because with terrorism you can't have investment. He has as well a must stop war, left and right, because with war you can't invest. It's true that the area is destroyed, so you have a lot of opportunities to rebuild. But again, there are other countries in the area which are rich, like us. Africa is very rich. So I am a little bit, because I always said that the world needs a new economic theory to manage that globe due to the technology.
Can he be leading the world? Can he, as a successful business, because he's not a politician. Donald Trump will be politicized indeed.
Yes,
but
he will have definitely people to help. This is the United States.
I understand, but can we capitalize, or can the world maybe capitalize on the business mentality that he will want to make money?
I think this is the right way, in my personal opinion. And maybe we talked a lot about this previously when I told you we need a new theory to manage economics on Earth. It cannot continue like this. You cannot continue by having that, even economic war. It's not to the good of anybody. You want to lead, lead. You want to be the best, be. But again, the world became too small that any problem happening anywhere in the world affects the whole world.
It affects the whole world. I mean, the flow of the economic downing in Europe, for example, it affected us. Exactly. It affected the Suez Canal project. I mean, it's all interlinked indeed.
Exactly. And that's why I said his speech to me opened new avenues.
Did you hear it from a predecessor? Because we're always very, very pessimistic about what the president-elect, the U.S. president-elect says, because the campaign speech and the inaugural speech is very different from what happens in reality. Do you sense something different in Donald Trump's tone?
Very different.
Is there potential?
During his campaign, he was talking in a way, and the speech when he was announced president was very different. That's why I had some optimism, and I said, well, I think we're going to see different approach. The United States is a big country. Big institutions are running the country. It doesn't change that much with the change of it. The goals could be different, but the way to achieve them are different. I always believe you can achieve, you want to be #1 countries in the world, it's your right. You can always achieve it with economics, in my personal opinion. But I do not really buy the concept of war everywhere so that you be the #1. This is a destroyable approach, and I think this was the system of the United States previously. Was not accepted by anybody, you see. So I think, I hope, listening to what he said, I hope that the international policy will change a little bit. People cannot continue to suffer like that. Look left and right. What is happening in Syria is unacceptable. Iraq was totally destroyed. Yemen, Libya, Sudan, what is this? This is unacceptable, honestly. Those are human beings. Nobody can accept that. You want to rule the world, rule the world. You want to be #1, be #1, but with economics, not like this.
Going back to the local scene and economic reform, the role of the private sector, are we engaging the private sector enough?
You mentioned something very important. If the Egyptian private sector will not be engaged, you will not see a reform. The Egyptians must start working. The foreigners will never come to a market where the Egyptians do not want to work. Second, any foreign company, when it comes to the market, they come jointly with local investors, either private or PPP with the government, public-private partnership. They will never come alone totally, especially sometimes in some special assignments, but generally speaking, they come joint. So if the Egyptians investor will not start by moving, I have great doubts that other investors will come.
How about engaging the small and medium enterprises? Because also with the economic reform program, let's consider them the middle class.
This is important for stability. We never forget that we have around 60% of the population young generation. Those have to work, and you cannot hire them all.
No.
See? So they have to develop their own business. See? So that's why small and medium size are extremely important, so that you really engage the
How can you protect them in light of the inflation, of the regulations?
Mr. President had a meeting last week where he made 17 points very important. Most of those points are to encourage that generation, whether to work in agriculture, in industry, and he gave them tax exemption, and the land to be paid over 10 years, and a lot of benefits, so that Egyptians, young Egyptians, will start engaging into small and medium size. So you have to do that because the number is very low, percentage is around 60%. You cannot hire them all, no matter what you do. If you open 1,000 factory, it will not take them all. So they have to work on small and medium size. And during that meeting, Mr. President gave them a long list of benefits so that they start by moving towards the medium and small size enterprises. And he gave them also the chance to take land and to pay it over 10 years, subject to if you produce something instead of we import, or if you produce food or whatever product we export. There are many attractive points, but you cannot disregard that large number of population. It's 60% of the population. It's a very large number.
The informal sector.
The informal sector, I would tend to feel during this period, leave them alone, because we cannot afford the close. The informal sector, I know it's informal, I know it's incorrect.
It's a large chunk.
You don't approach, in my personal opinion, leave them now, working as they are until we develop other rooms. He gave them as well the advantage if they wish to become formal. You see? They give them as well steps to make so that they can become within the formal sector. But during this period of instability, I'm totally against of running after them. I always say, if during the last 5 years we did not have that informal sector and the army, the economy of the army, we could have faced terrible problems. So I think it is not the right time to interfere in what they're doing. We put first the others on track, and then we can turn around and see how can we help them, not scare them. Because some officials have a very strange talk. We want to get them in the formal sector so that we tax them. What is this? If you don't give them a benefit, they will not come.
They will not.
Unless you want them to close, they will close, and you feed them. So I think we should leave them for a while until we settle other major problems.
Another issue is, which you mentioned, one of the reasons that drive away the investor as well is the currency issue, the double currency. So even though we have floated the Egyptian pound now and you can go to the bank and find dollars and everything, yet there still is a black market, which is an issue of concern.
I don't think that can continue because it's illegal now. Because if you're going to be, they catch you, that's serious. So I don't think it will continue, especially with the flexibility in the banking sector. When they increase the price every now and then, whatever, depending on the market. But no matter if you have a black market, investment will never, ever, especially foreign investment, cannot deal in this market. Because they cannot even put it in the books. How can they justify? They cannot, you see? And they cannot as well take the chance that they could be caught. It would be a scandal. And those companies are big and they have stocks in the international markets. The reputation is
catastrophic.
Catastrophic to them. So they cannot do that. So I think eventually it will disappear. But this...
Are we on the track to make it disappear?
Yes. But people have to understand that sometimes the price in the bank will increase. I don't care. The price will increase or decrease. The issue is, can I get it legally in the banking sector? Is it one price for the currency? That's what the multinationals or the big companies care for. This is what I care for. But the price, it is always manageable. You see what I mean? We work with our cost, but what is not manageable is that you ask me to go illegal. I cannot. So a question of a second market, I don't think it will appear again. First, the penalty is too high. Second, I don't think people will run.
So we're on the way of shrinking or eliminating that
eliminating
market.
Totally, I think.
That market, so to speak.
Totally. I think it will be eliminated totally, especially if we start receiving investments. Madame Christine Lagarde said that Egypt could expect investments in the range of $9.4 billion for the first year. That's a handsome figure. And again, if you move on for exploration, whether of gas or oil and the gold as well, that's very important. If you can really decrease import, if we can produce and export, mind you, the currency...
We decreased imports.
Yes, but the increase in the currency is very important. When the value of the currency increases, the dollar, it's a buffer which prevents import and encourage export.
Yes.
Subject to have goods to export. So you need to produce to be able to export. But this buffer is very important. Now I watch when I go to the market and I look at the imported products, price has gone up.
Yes.
It will go up to the extent that sometimes maybe you don't stop buying, but instead of buying 2 pieces, you'll buy 1.
And some have even opted not to buy.
Exactly.
Most of the people actually now are opting not to buy.
I remember very well, why do we import jam? We don't know how to make jam.
We make and we export.
Why do we import pickles? It's ridiculous. You see what I mean? There are certain things you laugh when you see them on the shelves. Why are we importing this? So I think the increase of the price of the dollar now is not very negative. On the contrary.
It's pushing us to produce.
Exactly.
Senator Pacinte Fahmy, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, our time is up, but definitely, even though it seems tough, and indeed it may be tough, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. And on that note, I wish you a very pleasant evening. See you same time next week. Until then, good night.